The first black SUV came out of the rain like it had been waiting for them. It slid across the empty mountain highway, headlights burning white through the storm, blocking both lanes in front of the limousine. A second SUV appeared behind them less than 3 seconds later, too close, too fast, boxing them in with the precision of men who had done it before. In the back seat, Evelyn Calder, the richest widow in 3 counties, dropped her phone. "What is this?" she whispered. Her chief of security, Warren Pike, turned from the passenger seat, his hand already moving toward his radio. "Stay down, Mrs. Calder." But the poor driver behind the wheel did not duck. Marcus Reed kept both hands steady at 10 and 2. Now, with 2 vehicles trapping them on a rain-slick highway and a billionaire widow frozen in the back seat, Marcus glanced once at the side mirror. Then he saw it. "That plate was on the service van at your estate this morning," he said quietly. Warren Pike snapped his head toward him. "Try tell you." Marcus did not move. Evelyn stared at the back of his head. "How would you know that?" Marcus shifted the limo into reverse. The engine growled. "Because whoever planned this," he said, "used your own security fleet to rehearse." The highway went silent for half a heartbeat. Then the man behind the SUV raised his hand, and Marcus Reed, the driver everyone had underestimated, became someone else. He cut the wheel, killed the headlights, and sent the limousine backward through a gap no ordinary driver would have seen. What Evelyn Calder did not know was that Marcus had survived this kind of trap before. What nobody in that limousine understood was that his past had not disappeared. It had only been waiting for the moment when another innocent person needed him. And by sunrise, the smallest screw on a license plate would expose the biggest betrayal inside the Calder estate. Before we go back to the morning that led to this highway ambush, remember this. Sometimes the quietest person in the car is not quiet because he has nothing to say. Sometimes he is quiet because he has already seen how ugly the world can become. And when danger finally shows its face, he does not need to prove who he is. He only needs to do what he has always done: protect the people everyone else failed to protect. Marcus Reed woke every morning before his daughter. Not because he wanted to, because the old apartment pipes screamed at 5:10, the heater rattled at 5:15, and by 5:20 the city buses below their window started moaning down Carson Avenue like tired animals. He would lie still for a minute, listening, not to the city, to Lily. His 8-year-old daughter slept in the tiny room across the hall, surrounded by library books, thrift store stuffed animals, and drawings taped to the wall with blue painter's tape. Marcus had promised her that one day she would have a room with a real desk, a window that did not face a brick wall, and a bed that did not squeak whenever she turned over. Promises were easy when you loved someone. Keeping them was harder when life had already taken everything else. Marcus had once been the kind of man people called when a route was too dangerous. He had worked years as a protective transport specialist for a private evacuation firm that moved diplomats, witnesses, and humanitarian doctors through unstable places. He knew how to read roads the way other men read newspapers. Skid marks, fresh gravel, a missing streetlight, a parked van angled half a degree wrong. The smallest detail could tell him whether a road was safe or a trap, but that life had ended on a wet bridge outside San Aurelio 9 years earlier. A convoy had been rerouted. A radio call had come from a voice Marcus trusted. His wife, Anna, had been in the second vehicle, working as a field nurse on the same evacuation contract. Marcus had seen the warning too late. He saved 4 people that day. He did not save her. After that, medals felt like insults. Contracts felt like ghosts. He came home with a little girl who still asked when Mommy was coming back from helping people. So Marcus disappeared into ordinary life. He drove airport shuttles, he fixed engines, he took night shifts, he carried groceries for old neighbors, and never mentioned the places he had been. His old company still called once a year. He never answered. His world became Lily's school schedule, overdue rent notices, and the small jar on the kitchen shelf labeled Desk Fund in Lily's careful handwriting. That Thursday morning, the jar held $38.72. Marcus was counting change for gas when his phone buzzed. "Reed?" he answered. "Marcus, it's Cal from Northline Limo. You still breathing? Depends who's asking. I need a driver today. Emergency job. Rich client. Real rich. Pays cash bonus if you don't embarrass me. Marcus looked at the school lunch he had packed for Lily. Peanut butter, apple slices, and a last chocolate cookie. How long? Afternoon to late evening. Pick up at Calder Estate, charity gala downtown, return through Northridge. At the name Calder, Marcus paused. Everybody knew Evelyn Calder, the widow of Thomas Calder, shipping magnate, landowner, donor, headline, mystery. Her husband had died 18 months earlier in what the papers called a tragic vehicle accident on a private road near the mountain pass. Since then, Evelyn had become colder, richer, and more unreachable. She ran the Calder Foundation like a courtroom. She fired staff without blinking. She spoke to senators, bankers, hospital boards, and museum directors as if they were all late for something. Marcus almost said no. Then he looked at Lily's desk jar. How much? 300 for the day? Maybe more if she likes. Marcus gave a dry laugh. Women like Evelyn Calder don't like drivers. No, but they like silence. You're good at that. By noon, Marcus was standing outside the Calder estate wearing his only black suit, the one he used for funerals and school meetings. It was a little too tight in the shoulders and a little shiny at the elbows. The Calder estate sat behind iron gates on 70 acres of wet green hills. The driveway curved past stone fountains, trimmed hedges, and a garage larger than Marcus's entire apartment building. 3 black SUVs were parked near the service entrance. 2 estate guards watched him as though poverty might be contagious. A young assistant in a cream coat approached, tablet in hand. You're the replacement driver? Yes, ma'am. Marcus Reed. He glanced at his shoes. Mrs. Calder values discretion. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not ask questions. You will not offer opinions. You will follow the route provided by Mr. Pike. Marcus nodded. Understood. The assistant blinked, perhaps surprised he had not defended himself. She led him into the garage where the limousine waited under white lights. It was polished to a mirror shine. Marcus walked around it slowly, checking the tires, windows, door seals, undercarriage, and fuel cap. One of the guards smirked. Looking for loose change? Marcus crouched near the front bumper. No, he said. The guard waited for more. Marcus gave him nothing. That irritated men like that. Men who mistook silence for weakness always wanted to hear fear in another man's voice. As Marcus rose, he noticed the nearest security van. Its front license plate had only one screw. The right side hung slightly lower, vibrating whenever the engine idled. Beside the front tire, dried red clay clung to the rubber tread. Marcus looked down at the garage floor. Clean concrete. No red clay anywhere. He filed it away. A voice cut through the garage. Why is he touching my car? Evelyn Calder stood near the entrance in a black tailored coat, diamond earrings, and an expression that made the room feel 10 degrees colder. She was in her late 40s, elegant in the way old money teaches people to be elegant. Stillness, posture, no wasted movement. Beside her stood Warren Pike, head of security. Broad, silver hair, calm eyes. Former police, according to the papers. The kind of man who made wealthy people feel safe because he looked like authority. Marcus straightened. Routine check. Evelyn looked him over once. My cars are checked by professionals. Marcus glanced at the limo. Then they won't mind me checking again. The assistant's face tightened. Warren Pike smiled without warmth. Driver, your job is to open the door and hold the wheel. Leave security to security. Marcus met his eyes. There was something in Warren's smile that did not reach the rest of his face. Yes, sir, Marcus said. Evelyn turned away. See, this is why I dislike replacements. They arrive with opinions. The words were not shouted. They did not need to be. Everyone in the garage heard them. Marcus opened the rear door. Evelyn stepped inside without looking at him. On the way to the gala, the limousine moved through the city like a secret. Warren sat in the front passenger seat, radio clips to his jacket. Evelyn worked in the back, speaking into her phone about foundation votes, hospital land, and a pending sale of her late husband's northern logistics property. Marcus listened without seeming to. He learned quickly. The Calder Foundation board was meeting that evening after the charity gala. Evelyn planned to block the sale of the Northridge property, a stretch of mountain land that included old maintenance roads, a private warehouse, and the site near Thomas Calder's fatal crash. Warren Pike wanted the sale approved. So did several board members. Evelyn did not. "There are missing maintenance records," she said sharply into the phone. "I don't sign away land because 3 men in suits tell me the paperwork is clean." A pause. Then her voice lowered. "And stop saying Thomas would have wanted it. Nobody in that room gets to use my husband's name to rush me." Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror. For the first time, Evelyn Calder looked less like a queen and more like a woman holding a door shut while something tried to break in. At the gala, the contrast between Evelyn and Marcus became a public performance. The event was held at the Marlowe Grand Hotel, all marble stairs, chandeliers, gold curtains, and wealthy donors pretending not to measure each other. Marcus stood near the service wall with the other drivers, hands folded, invisible. Evelyn entered through the front like a headline. Cameras flashed, people leaned in. A man in a navy tuxedo joked too loudly. "Evelyn, where did you find the driver? He looks like he came with a tow truck." Several people laughed. Evelyn heard it. Marcus saw that she heard it. She did not correct him. That was the second thing he filed away. The first had been the missing license plate screw. The third came 20 minutes later. Marcus was walking past the side hallway when he saw Warren Pike speaking to a thin man in a catering uniform near the emergency exit. The man held a folded route sheet, the same cream-colored paper Northline Limo used for client instructions. Warren's voice was low. Marcus caught only 3 words. Northridge only. The catering man slipped the paper into his jacket and walked away. Marcus stepped back before Warren turned. He could have confronted him. He did not. Confrontation without proof was just noise. Marcus had learned that in places where noise got people killed. Instead, he returned to the limo and opened the driver's side door. The official route sheet sat clipped to the console. It listed the return path through Northridge Pass. Marcus took a photo with his old phone. Then he checked the car's built-in navigation history. Someone had entered an alternate stop 30 minutes before he arrived at the estate. A maintenance turnout, mile marker 42. Marcus's jaw tightened. He knew that kind of turnout. Narrow shoulder, poor visibility, no houses nearby. Perfect for stopping a vehicle that had nowhere to run. When Evelyn returned from the gala ballroom, she found Marcus standing near the limo, holding the route sheet. "We need to change the return route," he said. She stopped walking. Warren, just behind her, narrowed his eyes. Evelyn gave Marcus a look sharp enough to cut glass. "Excuse me?" "The Northridge route is exposed. Weather's bad, visibility is poor. We should take the Valley Road." Warren laughed once. "The Valley Road adds 40 minutes. It also has traffic, lights, and cell coverage." Evelyn looked from Marcus to Warren. The assistant whispered, "Mrs. Calder, the board vote is in 90 minutes. Warren stepped closer to Marcus. "Are you refusing to drive?" "No." "Then drive." Marcus looked at Evelyn. "Ma'am, I'm advising against that route." Evelyn's mouth hardened. She had spent 18 months surrounded by men trying to control her. Lawyers, board members, bankers, security consultants. Every warning sounded like another hand on her shoulder, guiding her where someone else wanted her to go. And this man, this poor driver in a worn suit, thought he had the right to warn her too. "You were hired this morning," she said. "Mr. Pike has protected my family for years." Marcus nodded slowly. "That may be the problem." The air changed. Warren's smile vanished. Evelyn's eyes flashed. "Get in the car, Mr. Reed." Marcus held her gaze for 1 second longer. Then he opened the door. "Yes, ma'am." The first 20 minutes were quiet. Rain thickened against the windshield. The city lights disappeared behind them. Northridge Highway climbed through dark pine and rock walls, the lane lines shining wet under the limo's headlights. Warren checked his watch twice. Marcus noticed. Evelyn sat in the back, reading documents for the foundation vote. Her face was lit blue by the tablet screen. The widow, the empire, the money. All of it looked very small in that dark car. At mile marker 39, Marcus saw the red clay again. Not on the road, on the edge of the shoulder, where tires had recently pulled off and back on. At mile marker 40, the cell signal dropped. At mile marker 41, Warren's radio crackled once, though no one spoke. Marcus breathed in slowly. His hands remembered before his mind did. San Aurelio, wet bridge, wrong route. Trusted voice. Anna in the second vehicle. No, not again. He reached down with his left hand and pressed the small dash recorder he had clipped beneath the console before leaving the hotel. It began saving locally. Warren glanced at him. Problem? Marcus kept his eyes on the road. Not yet. Then the headlights appeared ahead. One black SUV across the road. Then another behind them. Evelyn lifted her head. Warren put his hand near his jacket and said, too calmly, "Stop the car." Marcus did not. Warren's voice sharpened. "Stop the car, Reed." Marcus slowed, but only enough to measure distance, angle, shoulder depth, and traction. The front SUV's driver door opened. A man stepped out in a raincoat. Behind them, the second SUV closed fast. Evelyn's voice trembled for the first time. "Warren?" Warren turned toward her. "Stay calm. This is under control." Marcus looked at the rearview mirror. The rear SUV's license plate was crooked, one screw missing. The same plate from the estate van, the same vehicle disguised, repainted, or swapped. His voice came low. "That plate was on the service van at your estate this morning." Warren froze. Evelyn stared at him. "What?" Marcus shifted into reverse. Warren grabbed his arm. "Do not move this vehicle." Marcus looked down at the hand on his sleeve, then back at the road. "Take your hand off." There was no anger in his voice. That made it worse. Warren reached toward the gear shift. Marcus moved faster, not violently. Precisely. He locked Warren's wrist against the console, used his elbow to keep the man pinned, and reversed hard before the rear SUV finished closing the gap. The limousine shot backward. Evelyn cried out. The rear SUV swerved left to block him. Marcus cut the wheel right, letting the limo's back end slide just enough to scare a normal driver into overcorrecting. He did not overcorrect. He used the slide, guided it, turned the car into the narrow gravel apron beside the road, then snapped it forward again. The front SUV tried to close. Too late. The limousine surged through the gap between the blocked lane and the rock wall with less than a foot to spare. Metal screamed along the side mirror. Sparks flew. The limo fishtailed. Marcus killed the headlights. Darkness swallowed them. Evelyn gripped the seat. Warren cursed and tried to pull free. Marcus drove by memory for 6 seconds. 6 seconds was an eternity when you knew what to do with it. He counted the curve, the drainage dip, the old maintenance cut hidden behind a stand of pines. He had studied every dangerous road within 50 miles years ago, because old habits did not die just because a man was trying to become ordinary. The limo dropped onto a muddy service road. Branches slapped the windows. Behind them, the SUVs overshot the turn. Marcus brought the limo under a concrete overpass and stopped, where the vehicle could not be seen from the highway. Rain hammered the roof. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Evelyn whispered, "Who are you?" Marcus checked the mirror. A driver. Warren laughed through clenched teeth. "He attacked me. Mrs. Calder, he's unstable." Marcus reached beneath the console and removed the dash recorder. "No," he said. "He's recording." Warren's face drained. Evelyn looked at the tiny black device in Marcus's palm. Then she finally understood that the man she had dismissed had not been causing trouble. He had been counting proof. They did not go to the police station first. Marcus refused. "Not with him," he said, nodding toward Warren, whose hands were now secured with zip ties from the emergency kit. Evelyn stood under the overpass in the rain, her perfect black coat soaked at the shoulders, diamonds trembling beside her jaw. "For 18 months, she said. I trusted this man with my house." Marcus looked at her, not unkindly. "That's how these things work." The words struck harder than blame. With Warren silent in the passenger seat and Evelyn holding Marcus's phone, they drove not to the estate, but to the Marlowe Grand Hotel, where the Calder Foundation board was already waiting. Evelyn entered the private ballroom 30 minutes late. The room was filled with donors, attorneys, board members, senior staff, and men who had already decided how the evening was supposed to end. A long table had been prepared near the stage. Folders were stacked, pens waited. The sale documents for the North Ridge property lay open beneath the chandelier light. Marcus followed her in. His suit was wet. His cheek had a small cut from flying glass. One sleeve was torn where Warren had grabbed him. The room turned. Someone muttered. "What happened to the driver?" Evelyn walked to the front without answering. Warren was brought in behind them by 2 hotel security officers, still trying to look offended instead of afraid. Board Chairman Ellis Monroe rose. "Evelyn, this is highly irregular." She placed the dash recorder on the table. "So was the ambush on my car." The room went dead quiet. Marcus stood near the wall, exactly where drivers were supposed to stand, but every eye kept moving back to him. Evelyn looked at the board. "Before anyone touches those sale papers, you're all going to watch something." The hotel technician connected the recorder to the ballroom screen. The footage played. Rain. Headlights. The roadblock. Warren telling Marcus to stop. Marcus identifying the license plate. Warren reaching for him. The sharp reverse. The escape. Then came the audio Marcus had captured earlier at the gala hallway. Warren's voice. "North Ridge only." The thin man in the catering uniform, the folded route sheet. Several board members began speaking at once. "That could mean anything. This is being misinterpreted." "Evelyn, you're emotional." Marcus stepped forward. Not much. Just enough. "No," he said. "It means he needed her on that road before the vote." Ellis Monroe glared at him. "And you are?" Marcus looked at him. "The man who checked the car." A few people scoffed. Evelyn did not. Marcus reached into his jacket and placed 3 items on the table. A photo of the estate van's crooked license plate, a photo of the rear SUV from the dash recorder, enlarged, and a small silver screw sealed inside a clear plastic bag. "The estate van was missing its right plate screw this morning," Marcus said. "The SUV behind us tonight was missing the same screw. When we escaped, the limo clipped the front corner of that SUV. This screw was embedded in our side mirror housing." The room leaned in despite itself. Marcus continued. "Same thread pattern? Same black paint transfer? Same red clay in the screw head?" Evelyn looked at Warren. Warren's face had gone hard. Ellis Monroe cleared his throat. "This is absurd. A driver is not a forensic expert," "No," Marcus said. "But I was trained to read convoy traps. I spent 12 years moving people through hostile routes. I know what staged security looks like. I know what a false road closure looks like. And I know what it sounds like when the man protecting a client is actually delivering her." That sentence landed like a door slamming shut. Evelyn stared at Marcus. The room changed around him. Not because he had raised his voice, because he had not. A woman near the back whispered, "Marcus Reed?" An older man in a gray suit stood slowly. He had been silent all evening. A retired federal magistrate who served as an honorary trustee. "I know that name," he said. "Reed was part of the San Aurelio evacuation inquiry. He saved a witness convoy after a route compromise." Marcus's jaw tightened. He did not want that room touching his dead. But the truth had its own weather once it arrived. The magistrate looked at Evelyn. "If he says this was a convoy trap, I would listen." Evelyn's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. Marcus turned back to the screen. "There's more." He played the final clip from his phone, the navigation history, the maintenance turnout at mile marker 42, entered before Marcus ever arrived. Then he opened a second image, the Calder Estate security log from that afternoon. He had photographed it while waiting in the garage. Warren's access code had opened the vehicle bay at 11:42 a.m. The same time the navigation change was entered. Warren looked at Evelyn. "You don't understand what I was protecting you from." Evelyn's voice was barely above a, "My husband's accident." Warren said nothing. Marcus watched him carefully. Evelyn stepped closer. "Was Thomas on North Ridge because of you?" Warren's mask cracked. Ellis Monroe said, "Warren, don't answer that." And that was the mistake. The whole room heard it. Evelyn slowly turned toward Ellis. Marcus did too. There are moments when guilty people reveal more by stopping another man from speaking than they would have revealed by confession. Evelyn picked up the sale folder. "The North Ridge land," she said. "That's what this was about." Marcus looked at the documents. Old maintenance roads, private warehouse, no public access. The retired magistrate reached for the folder, and a sale rushed before the internal audit. Evelyn's assistant, pale and shaking, opened her tablet. "Mrs. Calder, the buyer is a shell company." Evelyn closed her eyes. Everyone understood then. The land was not just land. It was the place where Thomas Calder had died. The place where records were missing. The place someone wanted sold, sealed, and bulldozed before anyone looked too closely. Warren had not only betrayed Evelyn that night. He had been part of the machinery that had kept her grief confused for 18 months. Marcus did not accuse beyond what he could prove. He did not make speeches. He did not tell the room what kind of men they were. He simply laid the evidence down, piece by piece, until the powerful people in that ballroom had nowhere left to hide. Hotel security called the state police. The retired magistrate called the Attorney General's office. The sale was suspended before midnight. Warren Pike was taken out through the service corridor. Ellis Monroe tried to leave through the side entrance and found 2 officers waiting there too. As he passed Marcus, Ellis looked at him with, "You have no idea what you stepped into." Marcus looked back. "Yes," he said, "I do." And for the first time all evening, Evelyn Calder seemed to truly see the man standing in front of her. Not a poor driver, not a replacement, not a worn suit. A father who had lost enough to recognize the shape of another person's loss. A man who had carried a terrible past quietly, not because he was ashamed of surviving, but because he refused to let tragedy become his whole name. By morning, the story was everywhere. Not the whole truth, not yet. The investigations would take months. The headlines would chase the money, the shell companies, the altered records, and the men who had mistaken a grieving widow for an easy target. But inside the Calder estate, something changed immediately. The staff no longer laughed when Marcus Reed entered the garage. The assistant who had once told him not to offer opinions could barely meet his eyes when she handed him an envelope. Inside was more money than Marcus had expected. He handed it back. "I was paid to drive," he said. Evelyn stood beside the limo, wearing no diamonds, just a gray sweater, dark pants, and the tired face of a woman who had spent the night learning how expensive trust could be. "That envelope is not for driving," she said. "It's for saving my life." Marcus shook his head. "Then it's still too much." For a moment, Evelyn looked like she might argue. Then she surprised him. What would be enough? Marcus thought of Lily's desk jar, her library books, her careful drawings, the way she pretended not to notice when he skipped dinner so she could have seconds. "A steady job," he said. "Day hours, when possible. No charity." Evelyn nodded slowly. No charity. 2 weeks later, Marcus became head of route safety for the Calder Foundation's medical transport program. Not security chief. He refused that title. He did not want power over people. He wanted systems that did not fail the quiet, the poor, the sick, or the forgotten. His first condition was simple. Every driver got listened to. Not just executives, not just consultants. Drivers, mechanics, dispatchers, night guards. The people closest to danger often saw it first. Evelyn agreed. Months later, Lily finally got her desk. It was not fancy. Marcus found it from a retired school teacher who was moving to Arizona. He sanded it, fixed one drawer, and painted it the soft blue Lily picked from a hardware store card. On the first night, Lily sat at that desk and drew a picture. A long black car, a rainy road, a woman in the back seat, and her father in the front, hands on the wheel. At the bottom in purple crayon, she wrote, "Daddy knows the way." Marcus stared at the drawing longer than he meant to. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. The next time Evelyn saw him, she noticed the corner of the paper. "What is that?" she asked. Marcus almost said nothing. Old habits, old walls. But then he took the drawing out and showed her. Evelyn looked at it quietly. For a woman who owned estates, foundations, cars, art, and land, she seemed suddenly humbled by a child's piece of paper. "She's proud of you," Evelyn said. Marcus looked through the glass doors toward the line of medical vans now being inspected by drivers, not ignored by executives. "She's the reason I came back," he said. Evelyn understood. Not fully. No one ever fully understands another person's grief, but enough. The world had taught Evelyn Calder to measure people by polish, position, and price. It had taught her that safety could be bought, loyalty could be hired, and authority came dressed in expensive suits. Marcus Reed had taught her something different. Sometimes the man in the worn jacket is the only one watching closely enough. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is carrying the exact knowledge that can save the room. And sometimes dignity does not arrive loudly. Sometimes it sits behind the wheel, says very little, notices one missing screw on a license plate, and refuses to let history repeat itself.